Hey, welcome back to another exciting episode of Spellstorm Miniatures. My name is Jeremiah, and we are doing something a little bit different today, and that is I am doing a solo episode. The past couple of weeks have been pretty hard getting all three of us together, Dan and Chad, for another episode, which is a bummer too, because in our last episode, we sort of celebrated 2 years of recording. That's 2 years of Spellstorm Miniatures, and we've been having fun doing it. It's been fun talking about the games that we love to play, and it's been fun creating a community around those games. We've been able to meet a lot of people, and we've been able to get some creators and some people who work in the industry to come on and do interviews and things like that. And I know it's been encouraging for me to be able to do that and to be able to have people on. But anyway, today it's just me, and I'm going to be talking about some games that I've played and just talk about what's going on in the world around us, just briefly, I suppose. But as you know, with 2020, not a lot of us have been able to get games in. And in fact, in between our last episode and then this episode today, the governor of the state that we live in enacted a freeze, which then closed down a lot of the game stores in our area and their spaces to play. There was one in particular that had, or there was two actually that were kind of near me. Actually, let me say that again. There are three that are near me that had allowed customers to come in and schedule, like rent table space, be able to play a game, but they had to, be masked up, and they had to, follow all of the safety protocols of 6 feet and washing their hands and things like that. But they weren't. These stores had space for customers to use, but they didn't have. But they weren't hosting actual events. So still no events, but at least they had the space. Well, then between last episode and this episode, our governor closed everything down. And so now there's no public playing space. I'm grateful because both of my boys play games with me, and so I've been able to get some games in, and it's some of those games that I want to talk about with you today, and just to maybe just give you a little bit of encouragement and hopefully point you to there will be light at the end of the tunnel at some point. I don't know what that'll look like. I wish that it would come sooner, but actually before the freeze, I got a chance to play a game of Warhammer 40K with a guy named Mike, and he was running some chaos stuff, and I put out some Astra Militarum onto the table, and it was a lot of fun because we decided that we would use the Crusade rules that are brand new to the 9th edition, and I really like the Crusade rules because it makes to me it feels like it makes 40K really come alive. I've been kind of off and on adding and collecting to my 40K army, but I don't get very many games in, and most of the time when I get games in, they're of the smaller variety anyway, and most of the time there isn't a lot of planning ahead of time, and so we would just say, hey, let's just select a certain power level, like maybe power level 25. Well, Crusade already has that built in because when you build up your roster, when you build up the army that you're going to be using, it will you get to select what point value you want to play at, and so I selected, like, I spent one of my requisition points and built up like a 55 point list of things that I wanted to play in the Crusade, and then the game that Mike and I actually played, I think, was at the 25 power level. So I had a couple chimeras out and a couple units of just regular guardsmen, and then one unit of elite guardsmen, and at least one commissar, and I can't remember what else I had. I was able to, I can stick a lot of things in there at 25 power level. Anyway, the game that we were playing, we had an attacker, and the scenario we were playing, we had an attacker and defender, and so the attacker comes from one end of the table, and the defender deploys in a circle that's in the center of their half of the board, and I think my win condition is if I'm able to kill their leader and kill their warlord. And I was unable to do that. In fact, I didn't have very much firepower to be able to break some of the armor that he had, and I didn't have enough special weapons to do that. And so I ended up not doing so well and in that department, and he was able to counter by taking out the models that had the special that had the AP to be able to take out his armor. And so it quickly, once the tables turned, once my first offensive was sort of withstood, and he was able to punch back, my army just melted in front of his army. So, but it was fun. I enjoy it. I really like campaign style games, and so adding the element of being able to play Crusade with 40K actually makes me want to play 40K more. I never got a chance to follow up with Mike or follow up with other players because it was shortly after that the freeze came. So I did get a couple other games in before the freeze at a different store. I played a guy named Eli in a Brawl Machine game of War Machine. And Brawl Machine is the smaller format. It's 25 points. And there's this additional rules such as you can only take one copy of everything at a field allowance of 1. And so you can't really spam units and things. And you can't play huge bases. And so it turned out to be a Cygnar mirror match. I was running Maddox 1 and he was running Jake's 2. And the thing that made his list a little bit different is he also had Malvin and Mayhem, which is that new Riot Quest model, and they're able to power up on their own, and they pretty much act just like a warjack in a game, and so he didn't. He was able to just basically crush my flank on one side of the board all by himself because of Malvin and Mayhem and all the things that they can do. I had an opportunity to win the game outright. I was actually up on scenario points, and so I was thinking that I would play the long game and that I would just try to win on scenario and just outlast him. And the second to last round that we were able to play, he was able to infiltrate in on my side and be able to contest the flag that I was scoring. And so my margin of victory, the points that I was up on scenario, got real slim real quick, and he was starting to catch up. But I was kind of doing the math and kind of felt like if we had the time, if we went to turn 7, I would be able to win. And unfortunately, the store was going to be closing soon, and so we weren't going to be able to finish the game anyway. And so I started looking at other options for for an assassination or whatever, and didn't realize I didn't have I didn't see a good chance of assassinating Jake's at all. And then I ended up giving up a stronghold to contest the flag that Jake's was scoring, and which then weakened my position. And that's right about when the store said that we had to pack up and go home. But in packing up, Eli told me that I had Harlan Versh, who had the ability, who has purgation on his weapon, which then gives him additional dice on targets that have like an upkeep spell on them, which Jake's had an upkeep spell on him. And so I could have been able to position Harlan Versh and then be able to use his weapon with purgation. And then if I had done that and maybe chipped away at his damage, then the one jack that I had that was close, I could have used to maybe finish the job off or something. But I didn't see it because Harlan Versch was so far away, and he only had a range 10 gun, and there was a forest between me and Jake's. Well, Maddox has snipe, and so if I had cast snipe on Harlan Versch, he could have walked around the side of the forest, and then he would have had the range to be able to shoot Jake's. It would have been one shot, and I would have needed to spike some dice, but it was something that I actually didn't see, and so he pointed that out, and he was actually afraid that that's what I was doing. But it was a good game. Um, I I know I've been talking about the Brawl Machine format, and I've enjoyed playing Brawl Machine, but I have to say I really like the 75-point game better. War Machine just feels more satisfying when you have all of your models up on the table, and your opponent has all of their models up on the table, and we're all clashing in the center to try to take over the scenarios and stuff. Um, Plus, you can get more shenanigans with some of the overlapping abilities and things like that. So I'm not sure how many more Brawl Machine games I'll get in. I think I'm going to stop playing it intentionally and just have it available if someone asks me to play. But even Oz, my son, he prefers the 75-point list as well, and probably because both of us also have huge bases that we want to put on the table. So we're looking at that. His troll stuff just recently came out, and so he's excited to be able to put that on the table. And we got the new ones are coming on special order, I think, in January. So the next wave of new ones. So it's going to be good. But anyway, yeah, I love War Machine. And there's one more game that I got in before at a different store. Is I got a game of Infinity in with Isaac. This was 150 points, so about half of a full game of Infinity. I was running Spiral Core. Sectorial, and I think he was just running vanilla Pano-Oceania, and he was asking me what I wanted to face before the game. He's way more experienced than I am, and so I'm still kind of learning the game, and he's leading me through some teaching scenarios, and he's a good teacher. But I told him that I had never faced a tag yet, and so I wanted to face a tag. And so he put one of his tags on the table, and for the life of me, I can't remember the name of it. We got a couple rounds in before I had to go home, but it ended up in a 2-2 tie because of the zones that we were controlling on this certain scenario. And what's interesting is I was moving in to be able to score one more zone, which then would have put me up at it would have put me at 4-0 at the end of the turn, and I moved, I think, 2 or 3 guys into the zone. I think actually it's only 2 able to make it and to be able to score, and of course his army has an opportunity for AROs to respond to what I'm doing, and I was one armor save away from getting a guy into the zone and stay alive and score, and then putting me up 4-0 on the scenario. But it was exciting. Everything was awesome. I did something on accident that turned out to be really good. I've got a guy with a missile launcher, and I put him in a position where he was able to do some really cool things in the game. I really like Infinity right now. I really like how there really isn't any downtime. It doesn't matter whose turn it is. You're still doing something. There's a lot of opportunities to make critical choices. And so, and plus the models are beautiful, and I love the tables. They're so terrain heavy. I really like Infinity right now. So I'm hoping to get more games in. Really what I'm hoping to do is try to convince Oz to let me teach him how to play, because I find that when I teach someone how to do something, I actually understand things better and get better at it too. And so Infinity is pretty complex. There's a lot of things to think about in terms of how you list build and just abilities of the characters and the characteristics of the weapons and and things like that. And so if I were to finish reading the rule book, I haven't done that yet. I'm still reading it. But if I were to finish reading the rule book and then try to show someone else how to play, actually putting models on the table and measuring and rolling dice, then I think some of the things that I read would just stay deeper in my brain, and I would understand it better. So when I play with Isaac right now, I ask a lot of questions, and but it's okay. Won't be playing with him for a while because of the freeze, but whenever the freeze is over and whenever the risk of going out dies down, maybe I'll be able to resume playing. Speaking of playing or teaching, I've been able to teach Oz how to play Malifaux, and this is incredible. We've gotten 3 games in the last couple of weeks of Malifaux. The first one was just kind of an intro game. It was a training game. It was like 30 soul stones, and I had 2 copies of Lucius, and I was able to make identical crews because I had enough investigators and whatever that play with Lucius. And so he had Lucius and I had Lucius, and we had the same crew. And so we went through the whole process of setting up and creating our schemes and our strat, and then working through the card mechanic of drawing and discarding and learning how to cycle your hand, and then just moving models on the table and seeing the economy that's out there. The action economy, the soulstone economy, and all of the abilities that your models have. And Oz really, really took to it. He liked it a lot. He liked being able to cycle his hand and cheating, and Lucius has these movement shenanigans with follow my order ability, I think is what it's called. And so he really liked it. And so I was like, all right, cool. So then I did a show and tell, and I showed him all of the crews that I had, so that I owned for Malifaux, which isn't a lot. I mostly just some guild crews, and then a couple Neverborn, and then like 1 or 2 Arcanists. And so I don't have a lot of Malifaux. And I was like, do any of these interest you? And so he had to think about it for a little bit. And so he downloads the app onto his phone, and he's been spending a fair amount of time reading cards and reading abilities, and then also kind of trying to catch the theme of the different crews. Because you want to pick an army that you like. You want to play a force or a crew that you're connected to. So he decided that he liked Lucius and that he wanted to keep Lucius as one of them. And then doing a little research, he wants to pick up Nekema. I don't own Nekema, so we would have to buy Nekema outright for him. And then and so I was like, okay, cool. So now we're starting to get a plan, right? So then he wants to play again. So this time he's running Lucius, and we're going to play 50 soul stones. So now we're going to go through the whole process of hiring out our crews and setting up the board and all that stuff. And so he's got 50 points, 50 soul stones of Lucius, and I decide Christmas is coming, December is coming. I'm going to run Rasputina, and Rasputina has the December keyword, so it makes a lot of sense for me. And so I run Rasputina, and so he's doing his shenanigans and he's doing his things, and Rasputina has a range spell, or a range attack, that she can shoot through line of sight and point of origin one of these ice pillars that gets created throughout the game, depending on whatever happens to get them to create. And so I was able to, plink away at his force and kill some of his dudes. And I had two henchmen that are fairly big. I have an ice golem and I have a Blessed of December on my crew. And they, one of them has armor too, one of them has hard to wound. And so he wasn't really able to, I was able to put them in some strategic places where he wasn't able to push them out of the way or even kill them. And so I went up like 3-0 on scenario after a couple rounds, and we had to call it for dinner. And so we put everything away, and Oz goes, I think I want to kill something next time. So I'm like, okay. So then we started looking at crews that can kill, and I've got Marcus, and he has the Chimera keyword, and he hires beasts to be part of his crew, and they go in and they do what beasts do, and they kill stuff. And there's other things they can do. They have the mutation upgrade and things like that. And I was like, do you want to try Marcus? And he goes, and he looks at Marcus, and he looks at the models, and he reads the card, and he's like, yeah, I want to try Marcus. So I give him Marcus to look over and play with. And so last night we decided we're going to play another game of Malifaux. And we go through the whole setup, and I declare Rasputina again. I'm going to run Rasputina a couple times before I run something else at him, and it doesn't pick Marcus. He picks Lucius again. And so I was like, wait, what? So he picks Lucius. So now it's almost the same match as before, but this time I change my hiring and I hire one more model. So now my crew is bigger than what it was before, and he hires fewer models, but then adds upgrades. And so now instead of having all these other models, he kind of has more of an elite force, I would say, because the upgrades do certain things for his models. But the downside is he has fewer models on the board to be able to accomplish some of his goals. And so I chose the schemes that drop friendly scheme markers into an enemy deployment zone and enemy side of board. And so I was trying to go for this theme, and I was just trying to be able to make the most out of my opportunity of pressing in on his side. But that also meant that I wasn't really worried about his models. I wasn't worried about killing his models. There was this, he kind of flanked his right side, my left side, and then I sort of flanked my right side, his left side. So we had models that weren't even near each other to do anything. And there's this bridge terrain that I have that was in the center of the board, and one of his models got on top, and I was kind of afraid of what he could do, and so I had to kill him. But he was playing more of the scenario. It was a good game, and we were sort of distracted because last night was also the Mike Tyson and Roy Jones Jr. Exhibition fight. And so we had done the pay-per-view, and so we were watching boxing while playing Malifaux. It's hard. I wouldn't recommend that at all to anybody because in both of those situations, you want to pay attention because boxing is fast and you can miss something if you just look away, right? And then Malifaux is so interactive, and you don't want to miss what your opponent's doing, and you certainly don't want to be distracted and then come back and the board stays different. You forgot what you're going to do, and and take turns out of action and stuff like that. But anyway, it was good. It was good. It was a good night. So what have I done? I've talked about Warhammer 40K. I've talked about War Machine. I've talked about Infinity, and I've talked about Malifaux. So far, that's 6 games that I've been able to get in since our last podcast recording. I think that's incredible. But there's one more game that I need to talk about, and that's Frostgrave. Between our last episode, I've actually been able to get 4 games of Frostgrave in, and these are multiplayer games because we're doing campaign mode. So my son Bryce is playing and Oz, and then my coworker. And so I did my coworker, we're sort of in the same bubble, so we've been around each other for a while, so we can safely play games together. But anyway, he came over almost like right after our last recording, and I did an intro game of Frostgrave, showed him how he already plays D&D, he already understands role playing, but he's never done miniatures. And I think Frostgrave is that perfect game that sits in the middle, that hangs in between those two spaces, between being a role playing game and a miniatures game, because it's both. You get to level up, create campaign mode, all the things, right? So he gets the intro game, decides he really likes it. So then we all made war bands, and then we played another sort of intro game, 4 players this time, and we added more elements because whenever I teach someone a game, I like to teach them in steps, and I like to slowly add things. Each time that you play, you're getting one extra bit. You're getting one extra element of the game or whatever. And so we just had a basic game that we played with new elements. He liked it, and we decided that we would just level up from there. And the campaign they're running is the Sellsword campaign, and it's basically 3 scenarios. And so we played the first scenario last week, and then and in that game it was brutal. Oz pretty much bullied the board, and he just owned the board. He had these barbarians and Templars or treasure hunters, I can't even remember, who were +4 fight, and then they would get in on the same target and they would be able to get the assist, and he was just killing people. And so Bryce and Dylan and me, we recognized what was happening, and a few of us just got a couple treasures and just got off the board really quickly. And then so what happens is, if there's any unclaimed treasure at the end of the game, the last person on the board just gets that treasure. And so Oz just totally bullied us and got so much treasure on that board. It was an extra hard scenario too, because before the game, each one of us blindly chooses a school, a wizard school, and then we reveal. And throughout that game, none of us can cast any spells in that wizard school. And so, but because you have spells from different schools, you can cast those other ones, but not the ones that we named. And poor Dylan, he only had one spell that he could cast the whole game. So he had a rough go, and he was next door to Oz. They had adjacent deployment zones, and so he was pretty much fighting Oz the whole game. And so he didn't get much, XP. He didn't get a lot of things. I got about average. Bryce got about average, and Oz just got the rest. It was a hard game, and so we all go back and we all level up, and so we played scenario 2 this weekend, and it came out completely different. So Oz has this incredible war band that is super strong, and they have, he decides to sell all his things for money so that he could buy magic items specifically for his war band. And Bryce and I are the ones who are adjacent to him, and Dylan's from across from Oz. And we ended up sort of splitting Oz's war band. So one half sort of went towards Bryce's edge, and the other half went towards my edge. And instead of running away from Oz, both of us decided to go toe to toe with him. And we did. And I got 3 guys in on one guy multiple times for combat, and one by one his warband was just being erased from the board. Meanwhile, I was able to sneak off 1 or 2 treasures only, and and Dylan, who was pretty much left untouched. Like there was no interaction with my warband and Dylan's warband hardly at all. And then whatever interaction he had with Bryce, it almost looked like they had like a treaty on that edge of the board. And so Oz and I were kind of a little bit upset about that because here we are punching our faces in, and they're not doing anything to each other. Um, but all that to say is this time Oz was not able to bully the board, and because we fought back a little bit. But in round two, Dylan clearly won, and actually he won by a greater margin than Oz did the previous game, and so maybe it makes up for the hard game that he had before. I don't know, or maybe it just means that all of us need to focus on playing a more well-rounded game and punk everyone rather than just punk one or two people. But we'll see. We'll see. I keep losing guys, and I keep losing them in between, getting wounded or getting killed, and so I have to rehire the warband like all the time. It feels like, but my wizard is leveled up to level 10 now, and I know I've taken the levels to learn a couple spells a little bit better. I've improved a couple stats, and then I've also learned 4 new spells. So now my wizard knows 12 spells total, and that's pretty exciting. I feel like in campaign mode I'm doing okay. Yeah, but I think Bryce and Dylan have some tricks up their sleeves, I think. So I love Frostgrave. I think it's the most fun. I love campaign games. I love skirmish games. 10 models or less, that sort of thing. And I love simplicity. And Frostgrave fits like all of that. So, and the fact that we can play it 4-player and everyone has fun doing it. Yeah, I like that. Anyway, so I've got a lot of games in. So I think it's 10 games. I think I played 10 games in the last month since our last recording, and I'm pretty impressed by that. I feel really blessed because I know that there's a lot of folks in our community that just aren't getting games in because they live alone or they live with family who don't play games. They don't go out to the stores, because most of the stores aren't open, or whatever. A lot of folks have been able to do a lot of painting, and they've been able to do a lot of hobbying in their home because that's something they can do on their own. But in terms of getting actual games in with real humans, that just isn't happening for a lot of people. And so I'm saying this with full acknowledgement that I know that I'm lucky that my boys play games and that Oz is willing to learn new games such as Malifaux and potentially maybe Infinity too. But I also have hope that we'll be able to have games in person in the future. I do. I'm holding out. We may not go back to how we were before. Like we may always have masks on and and stuff like that. But that isn't it isn't bad. At least we'll be able to see people and be able to play games together. So I want to shift to the hobby table real quick. One of the things that's really exciting for me is on Thursday nights on our Discord server, we host a paint party. And so people will just log on and we'll have the audio, and some people have video and be able to turn their video on and share what they're doing. And we just talk about whatever, a lot of times talk about books or movies or something, but we also, share tips and tricks. And we also ask for suggestions on coloring and things like that. So my hobby desk has been pretty sporadic. I can either game or hobby. It's hard to do both just because, both of them take up time, and, I work almost 7 days a week, it feels like. And so time is at a premium, but I've been assembling some some elves, some trees, some mushrooms, men, and some like rabbit men for this like super fey Sylvan Elf army or Sylvan Elves army for the Ninth Age. And I bought some elves that came, they had to do some minimal assembly, but they came already attached to a base, and they're a round base. And so I have to remove all of the bases to be able to put them on the square bases for the Ninth Age. So I've been doing that, and I've got wood movement trays or stands or whatever you want to call them that I need to glue together, and I keep putting it off because you have to use wood glue, and then I want to use like I have a bunch of vices to be able to hold them in place while they dry. And I just need a space where I can open up and be messy and do that, because the wood glue is going to spread. Even if I just put a little bit, it's going to spread as I clamp those things together. But I need to do that so the leads can dry and be ready when it's time to play. On the subject of Malifaux, I magnetized all of the bases of my Malifaux, and so because I got one of those metal tray transporter things for Malifaux, and their models are so gorgeous, but they're all like fine pointed, and if you put them in foam and you shake the foam, the edge of the model is gonna like snap off or something. It happens. My Dashel is missing part of his handle on his axe, and so I wanted to be able to magnetize them to a metal shelf, and so they wouldn't move around and they wouldn't bump into each other and break. So anyway, I did that. And actually, that's what got Oz interested in Malifaux, because I had put them all out on the table, and I just one by one systematically started, putting the magnets on the bases. And he comes over and he's like, "Hey, what's this?" So that's what got him started. Oh, another thing that I built was the new Legion of Everblight stuff finally came out. So the Blight Archon and Bethane and the what are they, Virtue Hosts. So I got those from Rune and Board. Pre-ordered them like a long time ago when they finally came in, and so I built them up right away. So when we get back to War Machine, I think I'm going to run some of the new Everblight against Oz. See how he handles that. Anyway, that's it, I guess. Just a short solo episode. Dan and Chad and I have had like really weird schedules with this COVID thing, and with Chad's schedule changing at work, and then Dan having he has young kids at home. I have older kids, and so there's a little bit more flexibility for me in terms of when some stuff, but the time that we normally record is no longer good for the other two guys. And so we're trying to figure out what our schedule is going to be, and we're going to try to figure out what the future is going to look like in terms of scheduling. But I know that I wanted to put this out there, and I know that some of our listeners have mentioned that we haven't put one out recently, and so I'm going to put this out for posterity's sake, and I hope that all of you found something that I shared exciting or cool. Maybe one of these days we can play a game together. But thanks for listening, and have a good one.